Close your eyes for a moment and imagine your body as a silent temple where every sensation is a prayer that has not yet found words. There is a fire burning inside you. It is not just any fire. It is an ancient, visceral heat that pulses in the places where you most felt the absence of love, where you most longed to be seen, touched, embraced. Today, I want to invite you to look at that fire with new eyes, without guilt, without fear, without shame, only with presence. Perhaps no one ever told you that this flame you feel, this desire that sometimes confuses you, sometimes unsettles you, is not a mistake. It is not weakness. It is not sin. It is vital energy. It is creative force. It is the same energy that moves galaxies, that germinates the seed, that forms the embryo in the womb, and that silently calls you to create your own reality. But the world taught us to fear it, to hide it, to use this force to fill voids, to numb pain, to repeat patterns. Few taught us that it could be sacred. Bruce Lipton reminds us that we are not prisoners of genetics. We are not puppets of a biological destiny. We are vibrational interpreters of life. And desire, when infused with consciousness, can become an activation code, a language between you and the invisible. It is not desire that holds you back. It is the lack of direction for it. Because desire without awareness becomes noise. It becomes repetition. It becomes addiction. But when that same fire is guided with intention, the body ceases to be a battlefield and becomes an altar. Maybe you have tried to control what you feel. Maybe you learned that feeling too much is dangerous, or that this kind of energy needs to be suppressed, denied, hidden. But what if true healing lies precisely in stopping the escape? What if the desire you fear is the portal to the life your soul has always dreamed of? What if, instead of holding back or exploding with this energy, you could transmute it, transform it, refine it, elevate it? There is a force within you that does not seek only pleasure. It seeks presence. It seeks expression. It seeks to create, not only with the body, but with the soul. Not only with touch, but with intention. And not only with desire, but with direction. This video is an invitation, a call to look at desire with reverence, to realize that sexual energy, so often misunderstood, so often judged, can, in fact, be the key to your reunion with the sacred that vibrates within you. Because perhaps true power does not lie in controlling what you feel, but in understanding what that desire is trying to create through you. This is the path we are about to walk. A journey between body, soul, and vibrational direction. A path where what once seemed like disorder reveals itself as a calling, where what once seemed like sin transforms into creative power, where the energy you once tried to silence finally begins to guide you. There is a kind of silence that burns inside. It is not the silence of peace, it is the silence of absence, of what was never named, of what was felt in secret. From a very young age, we learn to hide desire, to swallow our will, to silence the body, as if feeling were a problem, as if wanting were a mistake, as if burning inside were a sign of weakness. But this force that vibrates within you is not wrong. It is alive, and because it has been ignored, it became distorted. Vital energy, when it cannot find space to express itself consciously, begins to search for exits where there is no path. It turns into anxiety. It turns into compulsion. It turns into repetition. It turns into longing disguised as passion. And when we look honestly at these impulses that seem uncontrollable, what we find is not lust. It is a cry for connection. Perhaps you tried to fill that emptiness with promises, with relationships, with distractions. You tried to soothe what you feel with fleeting moments of pleasure that vanish too quickly. And still, after everything, the feeling returns. That restlessness, that hunger for something you cannot explain. Because what you truly seek is not touch. It is encounter. It is not excitement. It is presence. It is not pleasure. It is meaning. the body feels. And when desire is ignored for too long, it begins to manifest as pain, as anguish that tightens the chest, as loneliness even when accompanied, as attachment that never feels satisfied. What once seemed like mere impulse is, many times, a desperate attempt to feel something real. It is not about denying desire, but about listening to what it is trying to say, because the problem was never desiring. What makes us sick is not knowing what to do with this creative power when it awakens. It is treating it as an enemy when it only wanted to be recognized. It is using a sacred force to cover wounds when it was born to open portals. This energy that today perhaps shows up as anguish is the very same that can become vision, the same that can be refined until it becomes direction. The desire that burns in silence does not want to harm you. It wants to show you where love is still missing. And perhaps what it needs most is your listening, your presence, your yes. There comes a moment when the body begins to whisper truths that the mind does not know how to translate. An instant when the impulse is not just physical, it is vibrational. It is no longer an urgency directed outward, but a calling inward. And this calling does not come from the instincts, but from the soul. Because sexual energy, when seen beyond immediate desire, reveals itself as one of the most powerful technologies of conscious creation. This force that pulses between the lower centers of the body, where we feel the heat, the shiver, the expansion, is the very same one given to us to generate life. But not only biological life, energetic life, vibrational life, intentional life. Bruce Lipton teaches us that our emotions shape the expression of our genes. This means that what we feel, especially when we feel it intensely, is not limited to a moment. It alters the structure, it changes the chemistry, it redesigns biology. Desire is a bridge between the invisible and the tangible, between what does not yet exist and what is beginning to take form. But if that bridge has no direction, it becomes repetition. We repeat patterns, we repeat stories, we repeat voids, because energy that is not channeled accumulates. And accumulated energy without awareness becomes weight, it becomes conflict, it becomes cycle. To transmute is to give meaning to the inner movement. It is to allow the impulse to become direction, to let arousal turn into vibrational clarity. It is to take the raw matter of desire and polish it until it becomes vision, until it rises and activates something higher. When this energy is refined, it begins to ignite higher centers of consciousness. And in doing so, it activates a creative electromagnetic field around us, a field that does not just feel, but manifests. Sexual energy is not an end. It is a passage, a current of life that, when understood, becomes a tool for expansion. And when felt with awareness, it ignites in us the remembrance that we were created to create, not only children, but realities, possibilities, worlds. So when the body calls, listen beyond the skin. There is a hidden intelligence in your desire, a vibrational wisdom, a calling to transform impulse into expression and pleasure into creation. Because the body, when honored, does not just feel, it reveals, it manifests, it attunes with the soul and becomes a channel for the new. For a long time, we confused spirituality with denial. We believed that growing spiritually meant learning to suffocate the body, tame desire, reject impulse. And in doing so, we drifted away from wholeness. We divided ourselves into parts, the body on one side, the soul on the other. What we feel on one side, what we think we should feel on the other. But this division did not make us wiser, only more disconnected. The truth is that nothing you feel needs to be denied. It needs direction. Because the energy you feel, especially the one that pulses with the most intensity, did not arise by chance. It carries information. It carries intention. It is a language of your unconscious, trying to find expression in the conscious world. When you repress it, it does not disappear. It only becomes shadow. And the unhealed shadow, sooner or later, turns into suffering. To transmute is different from to repress. To transmute is to recognize. It is to give space for the energy to mature before being expressed. It is to look at desire the way you would look at a wounded child, with patience, with listening, with presence. It is not about giving in to urgency, but neither about ignoring what pulses. It is about transforming impulse into purpose, urgency into intention, fire into light. When desire finds purpose, it changes form. It expands. It does not explode. It directs. It becomes creative force, no longer something that demands immediate release, but a conscious vibration that aligns you with what you want to live. The energy that once felt like a scream becomes a silent prayer. A kind of prayer that does not use words, but frequency. And it is at this point that the journey shifts, when what you feel ceases to be seen as a problem and begins to be understood as a sign, a map, an invitation. Because the desire you try to control may only be trying to show you the path to what you do not yet know how to create. Desire is not the end. It is the beginning of a new relationship with your body, with your soul, with your ability to manifest. You do not need to fight against what you feel. You need to learn to listen more deeply, because desire, when understood, is an ally. It points to where your soul wants to go. It shows you what is still alive. It reveals what can still bloom. There is a subtle moment between feeling and acting, an almost invisible space where alchemy can happen. In that interval, between impulse and response, lies the power of vibrational transmutation. It is not an effort of control. It is not a moral demand. It is a deep listening to the energy before it escapes. It is as if desire were hot steam, and you could guide this steam to warm the heart, illuminate the mind, expand the field. Conscious retention is not a prison. It is presence. It is the opposite of repression. It is not about not feeling, but about feeling with direction. When you breathe with desire, instead of fighting against it, something begins to shift. By inhaling deeply and moving your attention from the sexual center to the center of the chest, the energy begins to rise, as if something inside you were saying, "Don't rush, don't run, just feel and direct." Visualize this movement, like golden steam, slowly rising from the base up to the heart, and from there, rising higher to the center of the mind, activating visions, clarity, presence. You are not extinguishing desire. You are elevating its frequency, refining the raw impulse until it becomes light, until it becomes vibrant intention, until it becomes field. Joe Dispenza shows us that when thought and emotion come into coherence, the electromagnetic field around the body reorganizes. It responds. It reflects. It begins to manifest with precision what we vibrate in truth. And this state of coherence is only possible when there is union between body, heart, and mind. When what you desire, feel, and think align in the same frequency. In this state, desire no longer commands you, it guides you. It ceases to be a fragmented force and becomes a channel of creation. The energy that once demanded release now expands in silence, generating field. And the field, when nourished with this refined vibration, begins to attract not what you want, but what you have already become within. The secret lies in this space, in this instant where you choose not to react automatically, but to transform consciously, where arousal is neither suppressed nor discharged, but transmuted into coherence, because it is in this coherence that the miracle begins, not outside of you, but in the vibrational center of your being. There is a kind of pleasure that does not reveal itself in the peak, but in the silent expansion of being, an ecstasy that does not need to scream nor to end. It simply happens and remains. A pleasure that asks for no haste, demands no response, needs no conquest. It is fulfilled simply in being felt, with presence, with reverence, with soul. This experience begins when desire ceases to be urgency and becomes conscious vibration, when pleasure stops being an end to be reached and becomes a state to be inhabited, a state where the body does not just react, but receives, where energy does not explode outward, but rises inward, not as repression, but as a vibrational choice, a choice born from the meeting of consciousness and sensitivity. Few of us were taught to remain in pleasure, to expand it, to breathe it with awareness. From an early age, we learned that climax was the destination, that release was the goal, that the end was the triumph. But what if the true power was not in the end, but in the staying? What if, instead of seeking the highest point, you could stretch the present moment until it became eternal? When sexual energy is contained with wisdom, it does not die. It matures. It condenses, like liquid gold being molded within, and instead of escaping, it begins to circulate. It touches other centers, other dimensions of being. It rises from the body to the heart, from the heart to the mind, from the mind to the field. And in this movement of elevation, it begins to activate something profound, a vibrational state of co-creation. This kind of orgasm is not a physical event. It is a vibrational portal. It does not require external contact. It is born from intimacy with one's own energy. When you allow yourself to remain, to breathe, to feel, without hurry, without guilt, without expectations, the body enters another state, a state where pleasure becomes a silent prayer, where the inner touch becomes light, where the entire field reorganizes around your new frequency. Bruce Lipton reminds us that we are co-creators of our reality, and that our energetic field responds to what we feel in truth. And there is no truth more powerful than a body vibrating in loving presence with itself. When pleasure becomes a state of gratitude, when desire becomes an expression of the soul, the field expands. Reality becomes malleable. Manifestations become subtler, yet more precise. You begin to realize you no longer need to chase what you desire, because you vibrate with what you desire, and this vibration subtly attracts everything in resonance with it. Reality begins to come to you, not as rushed magic, but as the natural consequence of your inner coherence. Because when pleasure is no longer an end, it becomes a sustained frequency. And this frequency generates life. The arousal that once begged for escape now becomes presence. The impulse that once screamed for release now asks for direction. The energy that once dissipated in an instant now gathers into the eternal. You do not deplete, you regenerate, you refine. And in this state, creation ceases to be effort and becomes the expansion of your very being. This is the orgasm that does not explode. It elevates. That does not end. It remains. That does not consume. It reveals. It happens when you allow pleasure to meet the soul, when you choose to feel with reverence, when desire is no longer haste, but prayer. And in this state, you become a temple. You become a channel. You become the very vibration of the miracle you long to live. Maybe you've spent much of your life trying to control what you feel, trying to restrain desire, silence the body, rationalize what overflows in you as creative force. You tried to be strong, tried to fit in, tried to extinguish that silent flame that kept calling you to something you didn't yet understand. But what if everything you've tried to control was exactly what came to set you free? Bruce Lipton teaches us that we are not victims of our biology. We are vibrational co-creators of our existence. Every emotion, every thought, every impulse, everything that seems like just sensation is actually language, a language between your inner field and the universal field. The desire you fear, the impulse you deny, the energy you try to tame, may only be the manifestation of something greater wanting to be born in you. You are not broken. You are in transformation. And every transformation begins when we stop fighting against what we feel and start walking with what we feel. When desire meets the soul, it no longer begs for release. It asks for direction. It stops being a confusing calling and becomes a compass. It points to what your essence wants to create, not to repeat old stories, but to open new paths Neville Goddard said that deep desire is the language of the divine within us, and that desire is not a mistake. It is a revelation. It is as if the universe, in its silent wisdom, were whispering through what you feel, "Here is the way." But out of fear, conditioning, or guilt, you may have closed your ears to that calling. You tried to control the fire, not realizing it came to illuminate. Transmutation is not a process of renunciation. It is an act of consecration. It is when you stop running from what you feel and begin to co-create with what vibrates. It is when desire stops being shame and becomes instrument. When energy stops being guilt and becomes strength. When pleasure stops being haste and becomes prayer. You don't need to understand everything now, but maybe today you can begin to listen from a deeper place, because that energy you tried to silence may be precisely the link between who you are and who you were born to be, the link between the invisible and the manifest, the link between your pain and your miracle. And what if the force that scares you most is the very one that came to heal you? And what if what you feel most intensely is, in truth, the first step toward the reality you've always sought? And what if everything you need is already vibrating inside you, just waiting for direction? Maybe your new world isn't outside. Maybe it's within you, vibrating, awaiting your presence. Along this silent journey, we have walked through desire, touched the energy that pulses at the center of the soul, and opened a sacred space between feeling and creating. And perhaps now, something within you has begun to remember, not with the mind, but with vibration, not with logic, but with the body. Because this remembering is not about the past. It is about what has always been there, waiting to be heard. You are not only made of history, you are made of energy, of intention, of frequency. And each time you choose to meet your desire with more awareness, more reverence, and less guilt, you allow that energy to return to its purest state, creation. Maybe you are realizing that what once seemed confusing was only energy without direction, that what seemed like addiction was only the absence of purpose, and that what seemed like sin was only a misunderstood force, asking to be loved, elevated, consecrated. Your body hears everything your soul whispers, and when body and soul meet in the same frequency, the universe begins to respond. Not because you did everything right, but because you aligned, because you stopped resisting and began to co-create. Bruce Lipton shows us that our biology responds to the internal environment. Joe Dispenza teaches us that the field organizes around our coherence. Neville Goddard reminds us that desire is the voice of God within us. Greg Braden speaks of the power of coherence between heart and brain. And Tom Campbell reveals that reality is an expression of our consciousness. And all these paths point to the same place. You as field, you as frequency, you as a channel of creation. The sexual energy you tried to contain is the very energy that can elevate. The desire you tried to deny is the same force that can create your new world. And the pleasure you learned to fear may be the most direct portal to your expansion. There is no urgency. There is no demand. Only a silent invitation for you to begin honoring what you feel, to choose more consciously what you vibrate, to allow the energy that once disordered you to now guide you. Because when desire matures, it no longer seeks release. It seeks meaning. It seeks expression. It seeks truth. And perhaps today, a new seed has been planted within you. A seed of listening, of presence, of conscious creation. It does not need haste. It only needs you.